So I had a strange college experience. I went to this weird little school with only a few hundred students that we all had the same exact major. And we all entered straight out of high school with the goal of graduating 6 years later with a doctorate in pharmacy. No associate's degrees, no bachelor's degrees. It was a weird program. And it was very targeted. The first 2 years were our gen eds and our humanities classes and our electives. And the last year was internships. And in between, we had 3 years of pure science. Not fun science. I'm talking medicinal chemistry, biopharmaceutics, pharmacotherapy, the stuff that makes you wish you had organic chemistry. But I made the best out of it. In fact, I liked 1 year so much that I even took it twice. And just before we went out on our internships, they decided it was time for us to become well-rounded human beings, to do something worthwhile and engage thinking muscles that we hadn't had in a long time. So they had us take a class with a long, drawn-out name that I don't remember that we called Senior Humanities. Now, by this time, I was burnt out. I was working full-time, drinking too much, never went to class, study the night before the exam. See also that reason why it took me that extra year. And I was just so apathetic and burnt out that I didn't want to take this class. But I figured I'd make the best out of it. So I selected a professor I had had for several electives, Professor Dan Donay, little d, apostrophe, big O-N-E-Y. He was an excitable gentleman from Louisiana whose habits, or his favorite things included the McDonald's Big Mac, studying the Houma Indian tribe, and teaching us heathen northerners how to spell his name correctly. And Dan was a great professor. He gave us all these opportunities to redeem ourselves and reactivate our brains, first of which was a 4-page paper, I believe, that we had to write. I, of course, knocked it out in about 20 minutes the morning of the class. He wasn't too happy with it afterwards, because after I'd handed it in and he had graded it, he called me into his office where he gave me a 9-page paper that I had written as a freshman and had me read it. It was a bit wordy, a little heavy on the prose, but it did the job. And then he had me read the paper I had turned in, and even I realized it was garbage. But he gave me an opportunity to redeem myself. He said I could rewrite it and get an A instead of the C that I currently had. So I stood up and I was my best self. And I took that C, because C's get degrees. But he was not done. He didn't give up that easily. A few weeks later, we had to read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which shockingly I read, because it was a very little book. And I'm really glad I did, because it was something that really made me realize how much I miss literature, how much I miss using that part of my brain that you don't have to when you're just pure memorization. And I went to class excited the next day. And I sat in the back row with my hood up, very hungover. And as he went around the room asking people questions about the book to prove that they had read it, which, spoiler alert, most of them hadn't, I just sat there hoping and praying that he wouldn't call on me, because I did not want to have to talk in class, because talking in class is for nerds. Eventually we got to the last question, which I still remember to this day. It was, why did Dr. Frankenstein study chemistry instead of biology? And I could have just let it there, but the person who was selected to do it was someone who I, at the time, probably considered my arch nemesis. And looking back, I don't feel any malice towards her. I realized we were just very different. We never saw eye to eye. Her name was Gina, and she was a know-it-all. And one of those people who show up early to class. and sit in the front row with the multicolored highlighters. We didn't get along. And clearly, Gina had read the book. Duh. But she didn't realize that there was a difference between reading something and understanding it, acquiring knowledge and learning from it. So she was rattling on this stupid answer that made no sense, and my brain caught on fire. No, you're wrong. The reason why is because medicine wasn't divided at that time. Darwin hadn't set sail. Mendel had not discovered genetics. No one knew anything about biology. Why would you come up with this bullshit? And can't you see there is all these things littered in there, talking about the Philosopher's Stone? They're clearly all about alchemy. And what could be more than alchemy? Turning lead into gold, turning worthless corpse parts into human life? How important is that? And it was running through my head so vividly, I didn't realize I had been talking the entire time. And as I took my hood off and raised my head, I realized that the whole class had turned around staring at me. Some of them with their mouths actually agape. And I realized that for the years that they'd known me, they hadn't seen who I was. They saw what I had presented, an apathetic slacker who did the bare minimum. When deep down, I did slightly more than the bare minimum. And I looked up past the entire class, and I made eye contact with Dr. Dan Donay, who was leaning back against a desk with his arms folded and a smile on his face, because he knew what potential I had. He saw it inside of me and realized that all I need was a tiny little book to light a spark that would turn me into the monster that I am today. Thank you.